The room was a hive of calculated chaos, 1,000 conversations humming beneath the glittering chandeliers of the National Gallery's East Building. It was the annual Washington Press Corps Foundation Gala, a night where the Fourth Estate, political power players, and D.C. society collided over overpriced champagne and under-seasoned salmon. The air was thick with the performative camaraderie of a town built on ambition. In one corner, the cluster of journalists debated the latest foreign policy blunder. In another, a senator laughed a little too loudly at a lobbyist's joke. But the true theater of the evening was reserved for the arrivals, the choreographed dance of who was seen with whom. Jasmine Crockett, the newly elected congresswoman from Texas's 30th district, stood near the bar, nursing a club soda with lime. She was a striking figure, tall and elegant in a burnt orange gown that matched the defiant spirit of her district. Her staff had warned her that these events were minefields, less about policy and more about perception. "Smile, be gracious, and don't let anyone bait you," her chief of staff, a veteran of 30 years in Texas politics, had texted her an hour ago. Jasmine intended to follow that advice. She was here to represent her constituents, to put a face to the name that was increasingly becoming a thorn in the side of the established order. Across the room, a different kind of spotlight flickered to life. Ivanka Trump, former advisor to the president and daughter of the man Jasmine had spent the last 2 years campaigning against, made her entrance. She was a vision of curated perfection, a silk gown the color of pale honey, her hair a cascade of polished waves, her smile a diplomatic blend of warmth and detachment. She moved through the crowd like a figure skater, acknowledging admirers with a graceful nod, her eyes scanning the room not for friends, but for threats and opportunities. Her husband, Jared Kushner, was in deep conversation with a hedge fund manager near the terrace doors, leaving Ivanka to work the room solo. Their paths had crossed before, in the abstract world of headlines and cable news. Jasmine had been vocal in her criticism of the Trump administration's family separation policy, an issue that had always seemed to be Ivanka's ostensible portfolio. Jasmine had called it a masterclass in performative empathy, a soundbite that had gone viral and earned her a permanent spot on the former first daughter's radar. Tonight, the algorithm of D.C. social politics was about to bring them into direct collision. Ivanka's progress was a slow, deliberate procession. She paused by a group of network anchors, offering a few words that had them nodding thoughtfully. She shared a brief whispered confidence with a senior senator from Maine. And then her trajectory became clear. Her eyes, cool and assessing, locked onto Jasmine. It was a look of deliberate intent, a predator sizing up its prey in a well-lit, civilized arena. Jasmine felt it before she saw it, a subtle shift in the ambient energy, a drop in temperature. She turned from the bar just as Ivanka arrived, a shimmering vision of practiced elegance. "Congresswoman Crockett," Ivanka said, her voice a smooth, melodic alto. "I'm Ivanka Trump. We haven't been formally introduced." Jasmine's smile was polite but didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Trump, a pleasure." The words were a required formality, devoid of warmth. The small circle of people around them instinctively widened by a few inches, sensing the static electricity in the air. This was a moment the town lived for. Ivanka tilted her head, a gesture of curious concern that seemed rehearsed. "I've been following your energetic entrance to national politics. It's quite something to watch." "I represent a district that requires energy," Jasmine replied, her tone even. "They sent me here to be their voice, not their echo." A faint condescending smile played on Ivanka's lips. "Of course, and you certainly are vocal. I was just telling someone how much I admire your passion. It's a shame it's so often misdirected." The insult was wrapped in silk, delivered with the smooth assurance of someone used to having the final word in every room she entered. A few nearby guests shifted their weight, a soft murmur of anticipation rippling through the air. A junior reporter from the Post instinctively pulled out his phone, pretending to check emails, his thumb ready on the voice memo app. Jasmine's smile tightened a fraction. Misdirected? I call it focused, on things like keeping families together, but I suppose that's a matter of perspective. The barb landed. Ivanka's eyes flickered, a momentary crack in her composure. She was used to people being intimidated by her proximity to power, not using it as an opening to jab back. She stepped a quarter-inch closer, lowering her voice as if to share a secret, ensuring those nearest could still hear her. You see, that's exactly the problem. You come in here with your slogans and your sound bites, but you lack the sophistication to understand the complexities. You see things in black and white, which is why you'll always be on the outside, shouting at a building you'll never truly be a part of. It was a classic move. Question the intellect, the belonging, the very legitimacy of an upstart. For 14 seconds, it worked. The silence was deafening. Jasmine felt the weight of the room's gaze, the unspoken question hanging in the air. What will the freshman from Texas do now? She saw the pitying look in some eyes, the smug satisfaction in others. In that agonizingly long pause, she was just a target who had been neatly and publicly put in her place by a master of the game.
And then, something shifted inside Jasmine Crockett. It wasn't anger, not the hot, blinding kind. It was a cold, clear focus. The years of courtroom experience as a public defender, the grueling town halls in South Dallas, the constant need to translate complex issues for everyday people, it all crystallized in that moment. Her chief of staff's warning to be gracious evaporated. Graciousness, she realized, was a luxury for those not on the defensive. She had been invited into a fight, and she was not going to leave the ring without throwing a punch. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her club soda. The ice cubes clinked against the glass, a small, sharp sound that cut through the tension. She placed the glass on the bar behind her, a gesture of finality. When she turned back, her entire demeanor had changed. The polite mask was gone, replaced by a calm, almost predatory focus. She looked Ivanka directly in the eye, and when she spoke, her voice was not loud, but it carried with a perfect magnetic clarity that silenced the conversations around them. Sophistication, Jasmine repeated, the word dripping with a quiet, devastating irony. That's an interesting word to use. She let the silence stretch for another beat, ensuring everyone was hanging on her next words. You talk about complexity, about understanding the nuances. You're right, it is complex. It's complex to advocate for women's empowerment while your father's administration tears children from their mother's arms and cages them. It's complex to champion criminal justice reform while the people who enable the system of mass incarceration are given seats at the table in your family's name. She wasn't talking to Ivanka anymore. She was speaking to the room, her voice a clear, rising tide. So please, Ivanka, enlighten us. Explain the sophisticated nuance of that. Help us simple folk understand the complex, nuanced reason you sat silent while policies you now claim to abhor were being enacted. Tell us about the sophisticated back-channel conversations you were having that we, with our simple black and white slogans, just couldn't comprehend. The shift was instantaneous and electric. The low murmur that had followed Ivanka's insult vanished completely. In its place was a profound, charged silence. Every eye in the vicinity was now on Ivanka. The smirks that had been directed at Jasmine vanished, replaced by expressions of intense curiosity, surprise, and in some cases, a dawning, uncomfortable recognition. Jasmine wasn't finished. She had the floor, and she was going to use it. You see, what you call a lack of sophistication, we call accountability. What you call shouting from the outside, we call representing the people who don't have a seat at your fancy fundraisers. My constituents in Dallas don't need me to be sophisticated. They need me to be clear. They need me to say that when a child is in a cage, there is no other side to the story. There is no complex, nuanced counter-argument. It is simply wrong. She turned her gaze from Ivanka and swept it across the captivated onlookers. And the rest of us, the ones you think are just shouting, we're the ones who have to clean up the mess your brand of sophistication leaves behind. We're the ones in the courts, in the community centers, on the ground, trying to put families back together while you glide through galas in $5,000 dresses, offering platitudes. A woman near the front, a seasoned political reporter for the Times, let out a soft, involuntary, "Whoa!" A young staffer from the senator's office stifled a laugh behind her hand. The energy had completely inverted. The person on the outside was now the center of gravity, and the former center was isolated on a rapidly shrinking island of composure. Ivanka stood frozen, her smile now a rigid, painful-looking thing. Her carefully constructed aura of serene authority had been shattered. She opened her mouth as if to offer a rebuttal, but no sound came out. For the first time in her public life, perhaps, she was at a complete loss. There was no focus-grouped talking point for this. There was no PR strategy to counter a direct, moral accounting delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel in front of her own peer group. Her face cycled through a series of expressions: shock, then a flash of anger, then a desperate attempt to regain her placid composure. She looked around the room for a friendly face, for Jared, for anyone to step in and rescue her. The faces she met were not friendly. They were curious, analytical, and some were openly enjoying her discomfort. She was an exhibit, not an icon. I think you're misrepresenting," Ivanka finally stammered, her voice thin and reedy, stripped of her earlier melodic confidence. "Am I?" Jasmine interjected, her voice soft but unwavering. "Please, correct me. Which part? Was it not your father's policy? Did you not advise him? Did you speak out against it publicly? Did you resign in protest?" Each question was a hammer blow, each pause a fresh wave of silence that seemed to physically push Ivanka back. "This isn't the time or place," Ivanka tried, a final feeble attempt to retreat to the high ground. Jasmine almost laughed. "Isn't it? You came over to me. You wanted to have this conversation. You wanted to talk about sophistication and shouting. So let's talk. Let's have the conversation. This room is full of journalists, of record keepers. Tell them your side. Explain to them the sophisticated nuance I'm missing." The trap had been sprung and then turned completely on its architect. Ivanka looked utterly trapped, a gazelle caught in a circle of lions who had just discovered their own hunger. Her cheeks flushed a deep mottled red beneath her perfect makeup. Her eyes darted, searching for an escape route. The crowd, which had parted for her entrance, now seemed to have closed ranks, forming a solid wall of witness. Finally, with a mumbled, almost inaudible "excuse me," Ivanka Trump turned and walked away. It wasn't a graceful exit, it was a retreat. Her shoulders were hunched, her pace quick, her usual regal glide replaced by a hurried, clumsy step. She disappeared into the crowd near the terrace, presumably to find her husband and beat a hasty retreat from the battlefield she had so confidently chosen. For a moment after she left, the silence held. Then a low murmur began to build, but it was a different sound than before. It was the sound of a room processing what it had just witnessed. People began to turn to each other, their whispered conversations filled with a new energy. A veteran White House correspondent leaned over to a colleague and said, "Did you get that? Tell me you got that." A young activist working for a climate nonprofit stared at Jasmine with an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit, a donor to a moderate Democratic PAC, approached Jasmine. "Congresswoman," he said, his voice filled with a new respect. That was something. I don't think I've ever seen anyone handle her like that." Jasmine simply nodded, her heart still pounding a fierce rhythm against her ribs. "I just answered the question she asked," she said simply. Within minutes, the first tweets were flying. The junior reporter from the Post, his thumb having served him well, had a clip. It was grainy, shot from an awkward angle, but the audio was crystal clear. It captured the full 14 seconds of silence after Ivanka's insult, and then Jasmine's breathtaking point-by-point dismantling. The caption was simple: Ivanka Trump tries to ice out Jasmine Crockett. It does not go well. The video exploded. It was shared by political accounts, by celebrity activists, by ordinary people who had never heard of Jasmine Crockett before that night. The comments section became a chorus of vindication. She ended her entire bloodline. This is what representation looks like. Who was this woman? I would walk through a wall for her. The word sophistication trended for an hour, with countless posts juxtaposing the word with images of child detention centers. Back in the gallery, Jasmine was suddenly the center of a new kind of attention. People who had previously ignored her now wanted to introduce themselves. They wanted to shake her hand, to tell her how inspiring she was. The dynamic of the entire room had been rewritten. The whispers were no longer about Ivanka's dress or her arrival. They were about the congresswoman from Texas who had stood her ground and, in a matter of minutes, transformed herself from a target into a tour de force. Later that night, alone in her hotel room, Jasmine finally allowed herself a moment to process it all. She sat on the edge of the bed, her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. She scrolled through the messages, the news articles already being written, the tidal wave of support. She thought about her grandmother, who had cleaned houses in Dallas her whole life, who had never been to a gala like that, but who had taught Jasmine the value of standing straight and speaking the truth. She thought about the family she'd defended, the mothers she'd fought for. This wasn't just about a political win. It was about proving that their voice, when given the right platform, could echo through the halls of power and shake the very chandeliers. Ivanka Trump's calculated ridicule had been intended to diminish, to marginalize. Instead, it had given Jasmine Crockett the opening she needed. And in the 14 seconds it took Jasmine to gather her thoughts and the 2 minutes it took to deliver them, she hadn't just turned a room against her adversary. She had introduced a new kind of political force to the national stage, one that was unafraid, unfiltered, and utterly unforgettable. The echo of her voice, clear and powerful, lingered in the glittering air long after Ivanka's retreating figure had vanished into the night, a testament to the fact that true power isn't about the position you hold, but the truth you wield.